So I'm Jackson from Modal Electronics back in Bristol in the UK, and the last time we saw you at NobCon in Chicago, we had a prototype of the Argon8, the 37 key, which we were still finalising. We were still doing some of the kind of final tweaks to the firmware, and even more so the hardware, which has now been finalised. We had this very, very early production prototype, so we changed quite a few things, like the colour of the anodized steel top plate and this bamboo finish here, which is a really, really nice smooth finish that we have on here now. I think the unit that we had to show you at the time, we'd stained some wood that we'd mocked up ourselves on it, so it was very, very, very kind of thrown together. But now we have these production units here, and we've also, since we announced and started shipping this in December, we have now announced the 8M, which is a module, and the 8X, which is a 61 key. They all have the same synthesis engine, so in terms of the differences, it's only resigned to controls with the 8M, because obviously we've reduced this. You can pick up, obviously the size difference here is quite great. This will actually fit into a 19-inch rack, so it comes with some rack ears in the box, and you can pull these kind of rubber indentations out and screw in some rack ears. But just because of the physical size of the unit, we've had to kind of reduce some of the controls on here. So for example, the amount of buttons and encoders that we have here has been kind of reduced, in the way that we kind of got around some of this user interface to make it just as usable and not to kind of lock people out of any features, is that we've added more indented encoders. So these save on the buttons that we got rid of here, and it means that you can kind of use it in the same workflow without having to relearn a different kind of user interface. They're essentially, like I said, the same engine, so it's the same patches on here, on here, and on here. You're going to get the same synthesizer. It's just the physical functionality of the user interface on the M only that's changed. Between the three of them, they all share this kind of heritage with our previous products that I think you might have seen before, the kind of Craft Synth 2 and the Sculpts. We started with those products probably 2-3 years ago now, kind of developing them, and the kind of framework that led into those products has been extended to this, so we've kind of increased the resolution and tried to make them as kind of adaptable as possible, and kind of taken features from both of those and kind of implanted them in here, along with some of the heritage kind of products that we have, the 002. For example, in this we have a whole bunch of the waves from the 002 in wavetables, which is an interesting one because that instrument was static sort of wave shapes. The 002 was really, really incredible for its time as an instrument, but this is kind of expanding on the functionality of even that, so it's pushing the envelope a little bit there for us as well, which is nice. Just as a basic overview for the changes that we've had, you can see here we have a much darker anodized steel top plate. So this is a very much gunmetal grey blue, as opposed to the much lighter kind of blue tinged silver almost that we had previously. We basically chose to do this because we had some issues with the initial manufacturer. The way that the anodizing was finished, it was basically eclipsing. There was too much light kind of reflecting when you were looking at it. It was eclipsing the text. It was very hard to read. So we've gone for a darker colour. We've kind of upped the contrast with some of the text colours and things like this, so it's just much easier to read. And especially these guys, these bamboo end cheeks, which are really, really finely finished. They're like a nice matte polish to them. This is kind of one of the bigger changes cosmetically. But what we show first that's changed is the effects engine. We have this 3-slot stereo effects engine, and we can kind of click and choose through all the different effects types here, and we can kind of swap them around and rearrange them in any way. So I think before we had 3 effects that we could show, and we have all of them now that we can show off a little bit, and I think we can come back and do some playing with that in a little minute. But also the effects types, and these are really easy to get through. You literally just hold a button and you can just cycle through the different effects here, the different filter types, sorry. So as I said, we've got the standard filter that is very similar to what features on Craft Synth and Sculpt, a notch for a variation, and then this classic rounded filter and a notch variation of that. So that's kind of the lay of the land of the major changes. I think what we should do is maybe play some sounds and listen to some of the effects. So you can hear a kind of roomy reverb going on there, and there's some other kind of stereo width stuff going on. It's quite interesting. I'm going to make it into a poly patch so we can do a little bit more interesting stuff with it. Lock that in place. So I've locked the joystick now in a kind of Y plus, an upwards direction. It increases the effects level, so the wet-dry balance is increased to be more wet. And I've just locked it in place there, so you get this much more spacey kind of vibe for it. So let's just take a look through some of the effect slots. I don't know if you can see here, we've got the application on an iPad here, and we can come in and look at the effects page here. You'll notice at the bottom here we have a little section to load presets. We've included, I think, around about 50 presets. But what's nice is that I can just go into here and we've given you kind of all of these really, really basic effects algorithms. So I'm just going to go back up to here so that we can hear the full kind of wet of the effects, and I'm just going to choose some basic effects. We've got a basic phaser here, and we've given a basic variation of all of the individual effects types, but then we've also given some stereo versions, so some with some more obvious width going on, and then some kind of more extreme settings, and then multi sort of effect setups here. So we come to something that's a little bit more bizarre, like chorus delays and reverb. So there's a huge amount of stuff in there that's already kind of dialed in. So if you're not used to kind of programming effects or things like this, we've tried to give people access to the really, really essential parts, as well as some kind of more off-the-wall bits that are, you know, a little bit more creative. I think this is a really, really powerful part of this, because it means that you can really, really quickly start to dial in some quite complex sounds and not just have the kind of basic bread and butter kind of dry classic synth sounds. You can get some really, really weird stuff out of this. So that's the standard filter type, which is a kind of very, very similar to the filter that you'll find in Sculpt and Craft Synth 2. We have a notch variation of that, so I'm just going to move over to the notch. So what this is basically a kind of an inverse shape. You're notching out a part of the frequency spectrum and kind of moving this notch, and you can kind of widen it and tighten it up as well. So if I just get it to this point here, so now you can hear it's kind of notching. And we can use the resonance to tighten up how close that kind of notching is. So there's the standard notch, and then we have the classic filter type. This is a rounded one, so it's not as aggressive with the resonance, but it also doesn't suffer the kind of same bass loss that you experience with these kind of SVF filters. So it's a much, much smoother resonance. You notice when we had the first standard filter, it was picking out some of those harmonics and really kind of making them a little bit more aggressive. With this one, you get a much softer response, but you also get a much kind of cleaner top end to that resonance. And then we have a notch version of this as well, so this is a much softer notch. Yeah, so there's your different filter types. You'll notice with the classic ones, it's going to have a really, depending on which one you use, they're going to have a different effect. Like some of the filters are going to be a bit brighter and some of them are going to be a bit softer. So you've got a really nice kind of array of options of things that you can do to sculpt the sound after you've made all of your decisions in the oscillator section. So yeah, it's good filters, yeah. Yeah, so we're looking at end of February, beginning of March that these will be available in stores, so we're just finalising it up now and kind of getting them back from the factory, so it shouldn't be too long.